Well, hey Gabe, welcome to 2025.
I know, this is wild. This is our first recording of the new year, and we have something super, super fun planned.
Yeah, who did we have as our special guest today?
Yeah, so we've got Tim Page-Bottorff. And as if you've been in safety for any amount of time, Tim has probably crossed paths. You've probably seen him at conferences, seen his content on LinkedIn, or heard of him or other people that know him. Tim is just an absolute legend in this profession.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like you said, if you've been to a conference, if you've been to safety website, you've
Right.
seen Tim's work. So, super interesting conversation today as well, because we're focusing on kind of the strength of your community, the strength of your network. And I think Tim's a shining example of somebody who just gets out there, mixes it up, connects with as many people, and collaborates with as many people as possible, parks that ego on the side, and just goes in, with humility and curiosity.
Absolutely. And I think there's so much to be gained in this conversation. I know I really enjoyed hearing what Tim had to say. He's a fantastic colleague. I get the opportunity of counting him as a friend. And what's really neat about it is you see how Tim is so giving in how he connects with people. And we talk about how that actually has some benefits, even from a professional standpoint, of being able to connect with others and build that community. And I think we try to get to the point where we can quantify it in dollars. Uh, I guess you'll have to watch the episode or listen to it to see if we actually get there.
Yeah, so join us to this great conversation with Tim. All right. Well, as usual, I'm Scott Cuthbert, co-founder of Safeopedia.
And I'm Gabe Encarnacion, president of BBL Safety.
Yeah, and we were just chatting. We got a safety celebrity with us today, right? Right, Gabe?
Of course. Of course. That's how we
Gabe,
roll on this.
you must be the safety celebrity here because
No, I don't
usually
know. I don't know about that.
well, thank you for that. That was awfully nice, but not as much as a celebrity in my own mind. But that was very nice. Thank you.
It's funny.
Yeah, I think everybody who's been to an ASSP or NSC conference or been on the internet knows who Tim is.
Been on the internet. If you haven't been under a rock,
Yeah.
you probably know who Tim is.
Uh, too kind, you guys. Thank you.
But we have
Well,
we kind of did a wrap up episode in December, talked about 2024, but we also kind of hinted at what we're going to be talking about this year.
yeah, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted you on the show, Tim, is because we're looking at how being connected as a safety professional is, it has some a lot of personal benefits to it, but it also has a lot of professional benefits. And it's for both the safety professional themselves and the organizations that they work for. So wanted to get kind of your take on that concept of connection and community, and how does that really help you as an individual, and even from your perspective, how does it help you in job performance and maybe even job satisfaction?
Wow, that's a great way to get this thing started. I kind of when I start connecting, I start to think, is there going to be collaboration that's going to come out of it? So you've already used one of the key words there. But the end result, and I've learned this, I'd say over the last 4 or 5 years, working specifically with ASSP, is that what comes out of those two things, the two C's, collaboration and connection, you end up gaining a stronger, more balanced community. And the community can be shaped and learned almost like artificial intelligence. But as you begin this venture, if you want it to shape some of the things that you do for you personally and what's better is that it helps out any organization. So when you do this
Hmm.
for yourself personally, sort of in the same vein as human and organizational performance, when you get better individually, so does the organization, and so does its community. And
Hmm.
so as you start to reach out and look for those connections, yeah, I would love to discuss how it can actually help you out personally. But ultimately, for an organization, they're probably going to look to that investment and see what it's doing for them. And not only will it help you personally, but it actually starts to gain traction for the business as well. And so the organizations have something to gain in that
Hmm.
connection. Whether you collaborate or massively create this great community, the connections that you make in that community actually helps out a stronger, more healthier vision, and that's usually the organizations that you work for.
Hmm.
Yeah, I was curious. I was talking over the break with another community, kind of unrelated to safety, but they mentioned that a lot of their members are a little bit reserved, shy, perhaps, and but also intimidated, by some of the maybe experts or thought leaders, and they're a little reluctant to kind of to jump in. So what do you see, what's holding people back, in your opinion, from jumping in and being part of the community? And then what advice would you give those folks?
That's a really good question. And on a previous podcast, people had asked me what I thought about intimidation, and ironically, Tim is in the middle of intimidation and and having a conversation about what intimidates folks. And I had to frankly come up, and me personally as a volunteer leader, this is number one, kind of break the ice for folks that might look intimidated and have
Hmm.
some level of fear. And so you as a leader should be willing to go up to those folks who may not be engaged, who may be, I to put it into a very terrible term, but it might be that middle school dance where people are standing against the bleachers waiting for someone to ask them, or maybe waiting for someone to break the ice for them to go out and do that dance that they've been waiting
Hmm.
for half their life. And so for us, that's number one. Leaders have to go out and make that possible for those folks that might be intimidated or have some level of fear. Now, for me, as a new professional in this industry, I was at that level of intimidation and fear. And when I walked into my first chapter meeting, and I'm talking about a chapter at a level where there was, maybe 100 people at the meeting. I felt like I was both underdressed and too young.
Oof.
Now I had enough clothes, of course, but I wasn't. It was that I was wearing jeans and steel-toed boots to a meeting where I felt like people were wearing suits and ties.
Hmm.
And that was my impression when I walked in. But frankly, people were wearing polos and khakis. It wasn't anything like. To me, it just felt intimidating, and like I'm not going to talk to any of these people, so I'm going to sit at a table and hopefully nobody asks me questions. And when I sit at this table, I'm going to eat my food and learn and go. And the fear, it wasn't gripping me, so to speak, but it was one of those things where I just looked like I had a question mark on my forehead. And one of those leaders that I said that should be the one to break the ice actually came up to me and said, "Hey, it looks like you're brand new. You've never
Hmm.
been to this place before." And I said, "No, as a matter of fact, I've never been to any of these meetings." And they said, "Well, it looks like you're a fresh face and it looks like you've got some energy. So what is it that you're interested in?" And that right there, that door that opened, it just became like a floodgate of, oh my God, well, I am interested in things.
Hmm.
And here is the list of things that I came for, and here's the list of things that I expect. And now and they have asked me to become a member. um, that was 1999. And when that leader of the Arizona chapter, at the time it was ASSE, the American Society of Safety Engineers, I'll never forget this person. As a matter of fact, as I became the chapter president, I named an award after his name for that
Hmm.
reason, for coming up to me, breaking the ice, and saying it's okay for you. But the second thing is that yes, don't you're going to have some fear. You will be intimidated when somebody does open the door for you. Please do me a favor. Just engage with that person. They can be a mentor. They can be somebody else to you. And I'm grateful, and I'll say his name is Mike. His name is Mike Cook. We created the Mike Cook Award for being an outstanding volunteer leader. And that way a person can feel free to speak up, which happens in the workplace. But ironically, if you go to these meetings and you create some level of established community and you learn that it's okay to speak up, well, you've learned that personally. And now you've got a tool to take back to the workplace because you just learned it at this meeting. So number one, be a leader. If you're going to be a volunteer leader, open the door for people that might look intimidated. That's huge. And I think number two, if you are the person that is intimidated or has some level of fear, if somebody does come up to you, you should actually say, hey, what it is you're interested in. And one of the things I didn't discuss was if you don't have somebody come up to you, you should be okay with going up to someone and saying, hey, what is this all about? What do you guys do? What's the main purpose? And so I think that if there is fear, it's normal. Don't worry about the fear. But if you can get over the fear after one or two meetings, don't have to worry about jumping out of the box in the first meeting. But if nobody's coming up to you for the first or second meeting, then you should go ahead and establish yourself within that room because you've been there a couple of times now and you're no longer a new face. And you can go ahead and say, here's what I need, here's what I'm interested in. And perhaps you might even get elected in as a volunteer leader yourself. But for me, if you're a leader, please make sure you open that door for those people that are brand new.
Yeah, I think that that's actually really, really, that's a great point to make for the ones that are established in leadership already. That, if you want to have a, a community that's building or people that are engaged in that community, you have to take that step and
Mhm.
start, as you said, opening that door and welcoming people in, because sometimes it's just that small nudge from somebody like Mike that will set this person on a path that will, move forward and provide some a very high degree of satisfaction and joy for them, and a huge impact for others that they're working with. Something I wanted to kind of dig into a little bit too is that you said that you could take some of those skills, even something as straightforward as being able to ask a question like, "Hey, what's this about?" or "I'd like to be involved," and you can start bringing that back into your workplace. Uh, what are some of those skills, even in being a connected community member outside of work, that you can start to bring in where you're starting to make an impact with, let's say, the whole organization instead of just a couple people?
Wow, great question. In regards to some of the leadership skills that you will learn throughout the time that you're engaged in these activities, you don't necessarily walk in the door as a brand new professional
Hmm.
with those skills. And so you got to understand that you'll develop them over time. But there are some ways that you can actually get a crash course through the School of Hard Knocks, and that university is not visited very often. But when you get that school visit, it kind of knocks you upside the head. And so the leadership skills that I'm talking about, and some people refer to them as soft skills, or and some reference them as leadership skills, but I think the biggest one for me was being able to read the room. Now, if you walk into the space and you feel like people are overdressed and you're underdressed, you're already going to be intimidated.
Sure.
But if you walk in the room and think that you're at the same level as these people and you're not any smaller or underneath them, you're in the same space as them, that'll help alleviate some of that tension as a soft skill. And so I believe that that skill, if you learn that through this characteristic of being in a community that's larger than you, is something that you'll really bring back to the workplace.
Hmm.
And so, reading a room at the workplace, if you walk into a boardroom and the boardroom is full of C-suite executives and you have to give a presentation, you're already going to beat yourself up at at delivering this mechanism because you're in this room that you believe you don't belong in. And so, if you beat yourself up for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 3 hours up to that meeting, you're already going to put yourself at a disadvantage. So,
Hmm.
walk into any room knowing, regardless of what your background is, that you're already going to be able to fit in because you've made it that way in your mind. But that is a soft skill that a lot of people don't learn overnight. They learn over a period of time because, well, they beat themselves up for a period of time. And now they've learned that you're going in to deliver a presentation. Those people put their pants on the same way you do, one leg at a time. And so if you're able to develop that right up front quickly, not necessarily in the school of hard knocks, because I would hate for anybody to experience that gripping fear. Don't worry, because I have. You start to
Same.
think you start to think that these folks are at a different level, then you're already going to put yourself at a lower level. You have to go in that room, and this is just one of many, but you got to go in that room knowing how to read it. That's number one. But number two, think I'm at the same level as these folks are. Nobody's better, nobody's worse, and I'm delivering information,
Mm.
factual information that they probably have requested from me before, and that can be at a boardroom. So you'll take this skill that you've learned at a connected community, whether it's ASSEP or NSC, I don't care, it doesn't matter to me. But whatever organization you belong to, it could be a small little chat room too on some social media site. And whatever room you're in, you can't believe that nobody's either bigger, better, or at a higher level than you. Just think we're all at the same level. We're all human beings, and I could deliver the information just the way somebody else would. And you could take that back to work. And that's just one skill you can learn in a community event like
Mm.
this.
I think just to draw on that too, and you're gracious enough to share your story of being the newbie in the room and recognizing that everybody's been in that spot at least once, right? So
Mm.
so when you're trying to get your mind right and recognize you belong in the room, you can recognize that not everybody just came out of the womb as a C-suite executive, right? Or a global thought leader. We'd all have all been there.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
great point. Tony Robbins actually even said that in one of his massive presentations. Like he said, I had to learn somewhere, so I started at the same level that most other people did too. And so, you could be at that level, and if you're ending up presenting at the C-suite level, it's likely that you belong in that room delivering that information.
Yeah.
And who's to say you can't be one of those executives later on? You just got to be willing to do it and want it. So, great point.
I think that's a great concept to keep in mind as well. That I think we talk about kind of negative self-talk every so often, and one of the things that I had found myself saying whenever I would be presenting in something like a boardroom or something like that is, first of all, the thought in my head was, I'm not supposed to be here, and it would kind of spiral from there, of just feeling like I'm out of place, and there are all these people that have so much more experience than I do. Why am I even in this? And I'm kind of faking it, and it's only a matter of time before somebody else finds out. And I think things started to change for me when I began with coming into the room thinking there's a reason why I am here, and I
Mhm.
specifically am supposed to be in this room. Uh, and it's very clear I might not have the same experience that others do, but I have a role to play in that particular situation. So even having that idea that, hey, I'm coming to this meeting or I'm involved with this community for a specific reason. I will have something that I can gain from it. I have something special that I can give to it. Uh, that alone already sets you on a path to success and feeling like, okay, well, I can start to branch out into these other areas and grow in those ways that might have been uncomfortable before.
Yeah, no, for sure. The Marine Corps, the military, the structure that I'm used to as a previous and traditional past of mine, in my experiences, they actually dictate chain of command. And so you got top down and you have to respect your superiors, right? But when you walk into a boardroom, just to your point, and you've got information to deliver, now the way I look at it is that yes, there might be a head or a lead or a director or a global somebody, VP, and all the information that you're delivering, and this is the reason why I use the word collaboration, is that you're all teammates now collaborating for the same benefit at the end. You're looking for the same result together.
Mm.
And so, in my mind, the room full of people, regardless of what level you are in the organization, you are now a teammate together collaborating for the same benefit of the organization. And that means everybody's on the same playing level.
Hmm.
It's something I just saw recently. I don't watch the news a lot, but I did watch something that captivated me, and I've been following her career a lot. Is It's Demi Moore. Um, she said something at an award ceremony that kind of struck me because it's something between women mostly, but it also can affect us in the workplace because we walk into a room and typically we bring a measuring stick. And it's not because we're
Hmm.
measuring size of things, we're just measuring things, period. Oh, well, that person's got better clothes. Oh, well, that person's got better makeup. And in our case, sometimes it's, oh, that person has a more structured role. Well, that person's got a better title. Um, Let all of that nonsense go and walk into the room, and you can own that space. And for me, I didn't learn that working. I learned that in community through activities and volunteering.
Hmm.
And so, if you're looking for something that you can bring back to the workplace, collaboratively work with your team and develop a community who's all responsible for something much bigger than they are. And that is a huge thing for me. And I'm glad you brought that up. It makes a
Hmm.
lot of sense. And I just hope a lot of people can actually take that activity. I don't care if you learn it in this type of a community or if even it's Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, it doesn't matter to me. Take it, own it, and you can walk into that space and it'll be your room. People didn't
Hmm.
ask you up there to just stand there. They asked you for information, and now you're part of a collaborative effort to make something better. And if you can believe in that, I believe that we can all come together in this workplace full of safety professionals.
Yeah.
So anyway, great point. I think I'm glad you brought that up. It kind of struck an accord with me because it makes a lot of sense. I'm not here to get accolades. I'm here to try to accomplish this one thing that we're trying to do together.
Hmm.
And if you can believe in that, I believe that we can all achieve success together.
Nice. Yeah. I want to pull on that thread a little bit and kind of zoom out a little bit. Uh, there have been some conversations, and I know Tim, you and I have been part of these conversations too. Scott, we've brought this up as well, that looking at some of these, let's say, conferences, whether it's online or in person, and asking, I've asked some of the attendees, what is the most valuable part of this conference for you? And a lot of times the comments that come back are related to networking and connections and building that essentially your community, your personal network and professional network. Uh, and if that's the most valuable, why is it so difficult sometimes to let's say create an entire event that's just that? And I think part of it is because an organization isn't necessarily going to, let's say, pay for their staff to go just hang out with a bunch of other people. So, how do you take that concept of networking and building a community and be able to translate that almost to dollars and cents back to a manager at your organization?
Can you imagine if we actually did have one event where it was just flat out networking and you couldn't walk away without having to drink 10 beers in a day? I can't.
I think we'd die.
I know. And then, by the way, the next one's coming up in October, so
Yeah.
make sure you recover in time. Um, you know what? That's a great proposition. I think from the value, and we'll use the word proposition again. The value proposition for a business leader is that they're going to look at education, number one. And I've looked at this, I've studied this when I was on the board with ASSP. We actually took a strong look at this. What brings people to the conference? And even though they say networking is number one, their bosses actually say what number one is. And so the ones that
Right.
actually afford the fact that they can go. So when it comes down to money and cents and all the design behind who's going to invest in your time to go, the bosses say education's number one.
Hmm.
And then the expo becomes number two. And ironically, when you're in the expo, you're actually talking with people. So
Right.
there comes some of that level of networking. And for me as a consultant, a business owner, and I'm working in on my own, and Gabe, this probably relates to you too. But when you're out there in the business and you're actually networking, and we've been in networking events before where we've had a really close knit group of people, a lot of your actual work and thoughts and ideas come from that area.
Hmm.
And so you as an individual might find more value in those discussions and those events, and you can't put a dollar sign on it. But I'm gonna challenge you, Gabe. I think you as a president of an organization that provides services and products in the safety business can actually probably put a dollar sign on how important that networking is. It's just
Yeah.
that we as a global EH&S director that sent my entire team to an event, we look at what kind of education benefits we're going to get, and did my senior leader maintain their CSP? And so that's some of the hardline things that people look at. But if that VP or that director or that global leader ends up going for themselves, guess what they're going to do?
Right.
We've already had
Exact
this
same thing.
discussion. They're going to be doing the exact same thing. As a matter of fact, they're probably going to be catching up with college roommates and people that they spent time in the, in the younger years of their profession. And so they end up doing the same thing. And so if you ask them as an individual and not as a business owner, they're going to say networking is number one for them. But if you ask
Hmm.
them, why are you sending your team? Well, it's because it's the best education that's out there. So
Right.
money wise, it makes a lot of sense to say that. But you as the individual, when you end up going, you're going to have a great time. And so from a money and sense perspective, you have to report back to the person that either invested in you or sent you and tell them, what did you gain in the networking events? And so you could say very easily, well, I learned that somebody from Wyoming was doing this. Oh, and somebody up in Northern California was actually doing this with their team. It's something I never even thought about for our team. We might want to consider it. As a matter of fact, they even said if we wanted to come, they would come down here for free and talk to us. You know, that can't be labeled with dollars and cents.
Hmm.
And you can actually get the benefit of a network by having somebody come down and share information of what was valuable to them and making an impact on their organization. And maybe that person, whoever that person is, brings down what kind of money, what kind of impact, what kind of metrics made an impact. And guess what? Now you individually have someone you networked with as a person, and now they can share the valuable insights of what they've gained by producing something or implementing something. And now they're sharing the impact with you. Well, you're going to decide whether or not you should do something like that. And guess
Hmm.
what? Now you've got something that's tangible that you can invest in with dollars and cents, and that comes back full circle. So initially, you can't really put a price on what the value of networking is, but the value proposition is, oh my God, it's priceless. You can't even imagine. And so
Yeah.
I would say if you're going to send somebody, you should make the investment, but make the investment for whatever reason you want, but let them come back and report to you what they've gained. And I think
Yeah.
I think it'll make an impact for everyone.
When we're talking, maybe just for frame of reference, when we're talking about networking and building community, I know Gabe's amazing at it, and I know Tim, you're super well connected. So what does it look like, so people who might not feel like they're really well connected or have that community or network? Is this like, you're reaching out to somebody weekly, you're touching base monthly, you have people like you want to contribute, right? You don't want to just you just don't want to just be receiving value. You want to give value. So I know it's probably a big question to answer, but what would some frameworks or baselines for community or networking look like for people who might not be engaged?
Well, that's a great question. We could probably, the three of us, put an article together on the best way to
Oh,
approach
seriously.
this.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and outline it here with four things. I'll give
Right.
you four things.
I'm
Okay.
gonna start my notes right now. Hold on.
Yeah.
So number one, when you end up going to these events, you can't. Now, I'm sorry if you're an introvert, then do what you got to do. But for the most part, if you're on the teeter totter and trying to decide whether or not you should go to that group and talk to them, there's no decision. Go to that group and talk to them. I'm going to guarantee that 99% of them, with an outlier that might be like, I'm going to bed, an outlier, let them go. But most of them are going to say, hey, who are you? What do you do? Come on over here. Let's have a discussion. And that's happened to me all the time. Oh, what's
Mm.
this group talking about? So that's number one. Number two, you got to get involved with an organization. And so whether that's volunteering or participating, to me, it doesn't matter. You got to start participating in extra community events. So I'm not going to call it extracurricular events. I'm going to say extra community events. And if there's a group of professionals that are meeting and that's something that hits the mark for you, then you should take advantage of that group. There's several groups that I belong to, and I find out that from a bandwidth issue, I try to go to the ones that are really not necessarily more pertinent to me, but the ones that I need to gain something valuable from. And so I'll select which group is going to get my time. And so what produces that, and for me, I'll just say this out loud on air, is that my volunteer time for both those organizations, ASSP and NSC, has produced so much for me that it's time for me to start giving back as much as I've gotten.
Mm.
And I am extremely proud of that one. Number two, just be a part of a community, do whatever you need to do. If there's time, crunches, then do the best that you can. Even participating in a social group on social media, that takes time. But at least if you're in that group and you're participating, and there's things that you can learn from that group. And I think if I could come up with a third or fourth one, the communities that you do belong to, you just can't be static. And I know a lot of that has to do with fear. And what I mean by static is that you just can't just be sitting there and not participating. And this is true for most everything, but in cases of community and developing something better for you yourself personally and trying to maintain that connectivity, you get what you put in.
Hmm.
So whatever effort you're going to put in is what you're going to get in return. So if you're sitting at a table and you're eating the lunch and you're gaining the education and then you leave, that's basically what you're going to gain, is the food and the education. But if you decide to engage with a person that you've never met before and then start talking with that person to find out what their interests are, what you guys can do to collaborate, then that opens the door for future participation. And now, Gabe and I, we text frequently, maybe once a quarter, once a month, once a week, depending on what's going on in our lives. But still, we still have that open wall. The wall is gone, so we have an open
Right.
door for texting. And so you have to drop that veil or drop that wall and be allowed, or at least allow yourself to have those conversations and making that connection and getting somebody's digits. I'm not talking about a date. I'm talking about just having just several side conversations. That, again, that's priceless to me. There's a value there that you can't put a dollar sign on. And so that, if I could just say the three things right there, I mean, we could come up with a fourth collaboratively, but for me is you gotta you gotta break the walls down, and you gotta get engaged. And I remember what you put in is basically what you're going to get out of it. So
Hmm.
put the effort in, and I think you'll get a lot out of it.
I want to circle back to something that you said. I agree with all of your points, 100%. And you made a little quip at the start that if you're more introverted, as you said, do what you got to do, but these are the things that really will help build that community and connection. I think I've mentioned this before. I am actually I'm more introverted than extroverted. And so even going to a large group event or something like that, I have to psych myself up before I go and then have a little bit of downtime afterwards to kind of regroup. It's not generally an energizing thing for me. It's something that takes a little bit more prep. But I think that's the same thing when you come into these situations. I'll go with your points in reverse for the introverts that are listening. Understanding that you want to get something out of that group. What is your purpose in joining this? No one just wants to go to, uh, you know, getting the idea that, oh, I have to build a community, I have to build a network, and then they just jump into it. Get an idea of what it is that you want to gain from it. If it's professional connections, if you just want support in what you're doing and not feel so alone as a safety professional, you want to build some friendships within the profession. Those are all very valid reasons, but you have an idea of what it is that you're doing when you're getting in there. And then getting involved, as you said, Tim, to get out what you're putting, you'll get out of it what you put into it. So if you want to build those friendships, build those resources, people that you can call or text, hey, be willing to go and be that person too. The moment someone says, I'm working on this kind of project. Oh, so am I. If you have any questions, I could love to collaborate with you on this. And then reaching out, I think that's the final piece in it. So once you have that purpose, that drive, you have a couple people you kind of sort of know, being able to just reach out to that person. Don't just let the conference pass or the meeting pass and then you never talk to that person again until the next year when you guys meet up. Send them a text afterwards. Check in, say hi.
Oh my gosh, it's
It
so
goes
cool.
so
Yeah, you're
far.
right. It does. It does.
Well,
My first PDC was 2005. And I was walking down a um, Bourbon Street, of course, and I just heard laughter from the French Quarter, and it was coming in an area where there was like nobody at. And I was like, well, how come there's so much laughter in that area? And I walked down that area and come to find out there were two people sitting there for dinner, but I'd seen them at the conference before. So I was like, I'm not going to bother them. I'm going to walk away. But my extrovert came over me and said, you know what? You're not going to get anywhere if you don't talk to anybody. So I walked right up
Mm.
to them, Mary Silva and Terry Norris. I'm going to shout their name out, but they were laughing about something in the safety business. And sure enough, Mary and I, we just hit it off, and Terry. And all of a sudden now we call each other, Mr. and sister from a different mother and brother, or mother and father. Anyway, I'm still great friends with both of them. And
Mm.
I don't know if that would have ever happened at that moment, but I didn't, connect with them at that time. But it it can make lasting impressions, and even better, to your point, it can make you lasting friendships that just don't disappear. Mary and I meet up now with our families once or twice a year. It's incredible how this happens. That's
Mm.
how close we've become. So yeah, you can't. Ooh, introverted. I don't want to lose that point, because a lot of folks, when they go to conferences, they're drop dead tired at the end of an educational day, and they just want to be left alone. There's nothing wrong with that. If that's what you got to do, I totally respect that. I will say this: if you can break that cycle just one day of the week and just give it a shot, I promise you, it'll bring you long lasting effects,
yeah.
like a friendship forever. So,
I agree.
anyways,
Yeah,
thanks.
because I wanted to jump in and Tim, maybe a little bit more like yourself. I'm fairly extroverted, but I was just talking to Jamie about this because again, Jamie, like he's the most energized, outgoing person you'll ever meet. Everybody loves Jamie. And I said, like I'm if there's if there's people gathering, I gotta be there, right? I feel
Mm.
like I'm missing out if I'm not there. I get excited about going and connecting with people, but there's still going to be times when you're like you say, you get your beer, the people you're talking to walk away, and you're standing there by yourself, and you're like, what do I do next? Like what even if you're extroverted, you're going to have those moments. So just so everybody can appreciate the fact that we all experienced that. And when I took some sales training, it was Dave Sandler sales training, and he talked about being an introvert and how he would make rules for himself and then kind of gamify connecting. So he said, if anybody's ever within an arm's reach, I have to introduce myself and make that connection. So
Mm.
if you're the introvert, don't make it about you having to be uncomfortable and reach out to people, gamify it, like, hey, if somebody's wearing whatever, a green tie, I'm going to talk to them. If somebody's wearing a, red blouse, like whatever it is, gamify that and don't break those rules, right? Like, don't make it impossible. Don't say, I'm going to talk to every single person in the room. Just make small little commitments to yourself. And like I said, I think, like Tim, you're saying, once you do that once or twice, you'll be like, hey, you know what? This isn't such a big deal. Everybody's very open and welcoming, and my experience is going to be overwhelmingly positive, and it's going to encourage you to, I think, do more. So
Yeah, well, that's a great adjective, overwhelmingly positive. I it's been nothing but positive. I have never ever, boy, I don't know if I should say this out loud, but here I am traveling, and after working all day long in my hotel room, um, there was an invitation to go up to a couple of friends' places. I turned them down today because I felt like I needed to be in my room and just kind of just being left alone. And so I got I got something to say for everybody that's out there. I am ironically very introverted, but when it comes time to going out there and learning and connecting, gamification is a great word. Can you find a way to make a connection that you've never made before? And if you've never made that connection before, what did you learn that you didn't know before? And
Hmm.
so that is a great point, Scott. I think you should probably put that in a book and say, hey, you know what? If you've never met me, well, let's meet me and find out what you don't know about me. That's a great way to put it. I really never really looked at it. I was just like, who's that person and how come I don't know them? And
Hmm.
what can we learn from each other? And but I like the way you framed it. I think that's a great base. That's a great framework, Scott. I think you should put that down. Um,
Nice.
gamify the way you understand people, especially if you're introverted. That's the caption for
Yeah.
those of you that are introverted.
Well, it's kind of funny too, is that these skills of even getting together with a bunch of people, getting to connect with them, stepping outside of your comfort zone, those are 100% transferable into your organization. If
Mm,
you're not, if let's say you're in sales and you don't like talking with accountants, but you might have to go and talk to accountants, so you can bridge that gap. Or if you're in safety and maybe you're not that outgoing, gregarious person, but you need to get the attention and the connection with frontline workers. Maybe that's to be able to get those skills to step outside of your comfort zone. Um, that is very transferable, and I think that that happens when you, as we've been saying, it happens outside of the normal work environment, and then
yeah.
you can actually take those skills and say, "Wow, this worked really well when I was at a conference. I wonder if I can do the same thing when I get back to work on Monday."
Yeah.
Wait, are you saying that there's value of going to a conference and there's value of connecting with other professionals? You came back full circle on that
We're
one,
getting
didn't
we're getting
you?
closer to that dollar amount. I'm going to
Yeah.
put a dollar to it.
I
That
was,
is
I was gonna,
awesome.
There's a
gonna
metric.
say, I was gonna say too, just that asking questions, right? Like, you don't have to be, you don't have to sound smart or, be an expert. Just people love talking about themselves. So just be that person that asks the questions and get them going, right?
That's going to take you a long way. I'll give you one other story here. I was in Pacific Rim Conference for Hawaii ASSP event, and they had a separate. Thank you, Trevor Johnson from Alberta. Trevor had this event that he wanted to put together with students and Joey Shibata. And so they decided that they'd have professionals sitting around the tables around the room. And I ended up getting a young professional um, just emerging. And she was like, I want to go into a meeting and I want them to know that I'm good. And I said, oh, so tell me what's your approach? And she goes, well, first I got to do things to make sure that they like me. And I just for some reason I sat back in my chair and I said, well, hold on, time out. Does it even matter if they liked you?
Hmm.
Or do you have information that they need whether they liked you or not? And she goes, well, if I deliver this information, they're probably not going to like me. I said, well, that means you'll end up changing your information and shaping what you need to deliver them into a position that's probably not even correct or factual, just so they
Ooh.
like you. And she said, oh, well, I never thought of it that way. And I said, just getting people to like you is not your job. As a matter of fact, you're going to come across people that probably are going to hate your guts. You have to be okay with that
Hmm.
because you're in a profession that saves lives. And I didn't necessarily deliver it like I was a Marine. I really wanted to come out with knife fingers, but she was looking at me going, oh, well, I'm more worried about the fact that nobody's, and she was young, but it has nothing to do with it. It's just I just don't know if I deliver that information, if they're going to like me. And I felt really bad. But at the same time, I was just delivering information to her, and she goes, "Oh, well, I'm glad we did this, because if I have to deliver terrible information," I said, "well, one day you might have to do that, especially if you stay in this business, because
Yep.
you might see an injury, or even worse, a fatal injury, and you're going to probably be the one that's going to have to deliver that information. And the people that you knock on their door to, they probably aren't going to like you."
Hmm.
And unfortunately, that's a bad way of looking at it. And you can deliver that information with a set of skills, leadership skills, soft skills, however you put it, that is more consumable. But don't ever think that you need to deliver information so that the people that you're delivering it to ends up liking you. That's not what this is about. You can make it more consumable. You can make it more, I don't know, what's the term that you want to use here? More suitable for people to hear. Um, but otherwise, don't do anything so that people will like you. You have to be yourself. You got to be authentic. And whether you're an extrovert or introvert, that's authentic.
Hmm.
Whether you could tell a story or whether or not, it's still, you have experiences, that's still authentic. So don't feel like you got to develop this persona so that way you can deliver what you think people need. I want you to deliver who you are, so that way the people that are listening get what they're supposed to get and not what you think they need. And
Hmm.
that's what's important to me. But still be authentic, still be relatable, and you can still deliver information that's more consumable, but don't lose who you are. Be who you are. That's all I ask.
I think that's huge. I mean, I think people's BS meters are pretty darn good. And
Mhm.
so if you come into a situation, as you said, with trying to develop some sort of persona, it's going to be really exhausting for you to keep that up. And ultimately, people kind of find out if you're faking it or not.
Yeah.
So I think authenticity is a great way to come into those situations. And so even as we're looking at wrapping up our time, there's so much that we've covered in how a community and connection and networking are so important. They're so valuable. But let's say you're a safety professional that is just slammed. Your work is so busy. You have obligations outside of work. You've got a home life. You've got a family. Uh, it feels like doing these things might just be another thing to do. It's just adding to your your already very full schedule. What are some words of advice that you would have for someone that says, "Hey, I want to be better about building my network and getting connected, uh, but I'm so busy. Where do I start?"
Okay. You've got a couple questions there. First of all, if you are a safety professional and you have feelings of being burnt out or overwhelmness, number one, I use this term a lot. I'm thankful for Safe Start, but you got to self trigger on that. You got to notice the times that you're overwhelmed and burnt out.
Hmm.
If you don't, the capacity becomes unmanageable. And so for you, step number one is to be able to determine that you are too busy. That's number one. And number two, you also have to recognize that if you had a community already in place, they would be able to help you pick up some of that slack. And
Hmm.
so now I'm not suggesting that you make a connection with a third party who's going to be the one that's going to do the work for you as a contractor. That's not what I'm suggesting. It it could be a route. Seriously, if you needed the help, you can hire a third party. And I've gotten to work with a couple of customers in the last 2 years where I made recommendations that you needed a staff or you needed a group of people or you needed more than what you got. And their bosses flat out said, "No, that's not going to happen. You got to do this." And so that feeling of rejection multiplied by the feeling of overwhelmness, multiplied by being burnt out in their job, ended up in a position of saying, "Oh, well, like I never get anything." So then they ended up doing nothing. They just sat
Hmm.
there. And yeah, so psychosocially, you have to recognize number one, that this is too much and be able to say it out loud. That means self-trigger on the fact that you're burnt out. Okay.
Hmm.
That's important. Secondly, recognize that a community can help you out. There are going to be members in your community that'll volunteer to help pick up the slack if you need it. I'm not telling you to take advantage of them, but there are going to be people out there. What can I do to help? I've got expertise in this certain area where you might be overwhelmed because you didn't want to tackle it because you didn't have the experience. You just set it aside. Now it's become a priority, and now you do nothing about it because it's sitting there. Tap into your community. So if you don't have one established and you're still overwhelmed, then you might need to get help. All right. So that's when a third party comes into play. Um, and I will tell you, if you develop a third party, make sure you develop their community within yours. If you hire a contractor, or you hire somebody to help you out, I can guarantee that that person that's consulting with you has their own community, and you can
Hmm.
start expanding by building into theirs. And I think that's a huge step, especially if you have zero. If you're at ground zero and you've got nothing, no community, no networking, nothing established, nothing built, and you're overwhelmed and recognized it, you can hire somebody to help you out if you've got the capacity or the budget. And that's something that you can tap into, because I promise you that person coming to your doorstep probably has a massive community. Most consultants I know that work in the business, they do know a lot, and they've got a crazy time of experience, and they've got a lot to share. But a majority of the work that they do, trust me, I know, because I ask the people that are really better than me, what would you do in this situation? And then now that network has become a circle of influence around this individual, and they can also help you out. And I'm not afraid to ask. I'm not afraid to ask. So that should be the last thing. Don't ever be afraid to ask for help. All right. Great question. My goodness.
Yeah, I'm glad you pinpointed that too, because going back to even the original question, I think we're getting closer to that metric on the value of having a network for the company. How expensive is it to have an employee that is burned out, disconnected, disengaged, and first, if you have to replace them, let's say that person's just done with it and they just leave, or worse yet, what if they're just done with it and they stay? And now you
Mm,
have someone that's just there, it's dead weight. But how
Yeah.
much more support could they have? How much more engagement could they have, and production, if they have that connection with others who could help them in the areas where they're weak?
yeah,
I,
for
I think
sure. That
I
could be
think
an
we're
HR nightmare too.
yeah, we're
Yeah.
getting closer to that dollar amount. So awesome. Tim,
Yeah, it's
thank you
been
so
a
much for your time too. This
Yeah,
and your
yes.
knowledge on this and experience. This is so helpful.
been a great discussion. I just wanted to say, that I've only ever once regretted, networking with somebody at a conference, and it was at this safety network conference about 6 or 7 years ago, I think.
Yeah, that was a huge mistake. Look where it got us.
Yeah, look where it got me doing podcasts with Dave and Carson. So
Right?
yeah, you never know. Like who would have guessed, right? Gabe, like when we met, who would have guessed that we'd be at year three of our podcast?
Yeah, it's insane. It's crazy.
I know it does get crazy, doesn't it? And you guys probably had some really good times too. So you'll always remember everything positive about these connections. Um and thank you for having me. I appreciate being here. I really do.
Absolutely.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tim.
Yeah, for sure.